Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we get into our new episode, let's recap the tense and emotional events from our last story. The episode was the final, quiet calm before the storm. The full Heartland resistance, now a well-equipped army thanks to their unholy alliance with Prince Ahmed, assembled at a secret airfield. After a powerful and moving final blessing from their patriarch Jack and a series of heartbreaking and unspoken goodbyes, the team boarded a black helicopter and flew off into a raging storm. The final and most dangerous battle for the soul of their family was about to begin. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now, today, the talking is over. The war begins. The world was a screaming and chaotic vortex of a wind and a rain and a rattling metal. The inside of the black helicopter was a dark and claustrophobic cage, a small and fragile bubble of a life being tossed about in the heart of a hurricane. The 6 members of the Heartland assault team were strapped into their seats, their faces grim and pale in the dim red glow of the cabin's emergency lights. The roar of the rotors was a deafening and constant presence, a sound that was a perfect and terrifying match for the frantic and hammering rhythm of their own hearts. They were flying blind. Outside the small and rain-streaked windows, there was nothing but a thick and swirling blanket of a black cloud. Every so often, a brilliant and blinding flash of a lightning would illuminate the cabin, a silent and ghostly strobe that would freeze their tense and anxious faces in a single and dramatic tableau. And in those brief and terrifying moments of a light, they could see the sheer and granite faces of the mountain peaks, impossibly and dangerously close, a series of dark and jagged teeth in the mouth of the storm. The pilot, a silent and grim-faced man provided by Ahmed, was a master at his craft. He fought the storm with a calm and steady hand, his knuckles white on the controls, his gaze fixed on the glowing and complex array of instruments that was his only guide through the treacherous and invisible landscape. He was a man who was flying not a machine, but a prayer. Ty sat by the door, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside. He was a commander, and his team was his responsibility. He felt the weight of their lives, of their trust, a heavy and humbling thing. He looked at them, at the faces of the people who had followed him into this storm. He saw Tim, his jaw set, his eyes a burning and righteous fire. He saw Caleb, his usual and easy grin replaced by a grim and focused resolve. He saw Ashley and Shane and Scott, a small and battered army, united by a love and a loss and a fierce and unwavering determination to get their family back, and a profound and quiet sense of a pride and of a gratitude washed over him. The pilot's voice, a calm and professional crackle in their headsets, broke the tense and roaring silence. Drop zone in 2 minutes. The wind is worse than we expected. It's going to be a rough insertion. Get ready. The team began their final and silent preparations. They checked their harnesses, their gear, their weapons. The quiet and professional clicks of a metal on a metal were a small and steadying rhythm in the chaotic and screaming symphony of the storm. The helicopter suddenly dropped, a sickening and stomach-lurching plunge that stole the air from their lungs, and then it leveled out, hovering, a small and defiant insect in the face of the hurricane's fury. The side door was thrown open, and a blast of a wind and a rain and a pure and untamed violence tore through the cabin. Go, go, go. There was no time for a hesitation, no time for a fear. Ty was the first one out. He clipped his rope, and without a backward glance, he stepped out into the screaming and chaotic void. The descent was a nightmare. He was a pendulum, being whipped back and forth by the ferocious and unpredictable gusts of a wind. The rain was a thick and blinding sheet of a cold and stinging needles. He could see nothing but the slick and black and vertical face of the cliff face, a few and precious inches from his own face. He hit the ground hard, his boots skidding on the wet and treacherous rock of a narrow and impossibly small cliff edge. He unclipped himself and immediately turned to guide the others in, a steady and grounding presence in the heart of the storm. One by one, they descended from the sky, a series of dark and silent ghosts appearing out of the swirling and black chaos. They were all down, they were all safe. The helicopter, its precious cargo delivered, did not wait. It banked sharply, a final and almost imperceptible dip of its nose in a silent salute, and then it was gone, swallowed once again by the storm, its engine noise a fading and distant memory. They were left alone. 6 small figures huddled together on a narrow and wind-swept ledge, a half a mile from their target in the heart of a hurricane, at the very top of the world. The final battle for Heartland had begun. They were huddled on the narrow and wind-swept cliff edge, a small and battered island in a sea of a raging storm. The wind howled around them, a physical and punishing force that threatened to tear them from their precarious perch. Ty had to shout to be heard over the roar of the hurricane. He unrolled a small and waterproof schematic, the paper flapping wildly in the wind. It was a simplified and tactical map of their approach route, a last gift from Val. He pointed to a spot on the map, his finger tracing a path.
Okay, this is where we split up.
He looked at the faces of his team, their features illuminated by the brief and brilliant flashes of a lightning.
The main assault team, me, Tim, Caleb, we take the direct route, up this ridge, to the coordinates for the ventilation shaft. It's a hard climb, and we'll be exposed. Our only job is to get to that entry point, and to get inside.
He then turned his gaze to Ashley and Shane.
You two are the key to this whole thing. You take the lower path along this ravine. It will give you cover. Your target is that communications tower on the secondary peak. It's the central hub for the entire fortress's external network. You knock that out, and Nathan is blind and deaf. He won't be able to call for a backup. He won't even know we're here until it's too late.
Ashley, her own face a mask of a calm and professional focus, gave a single and firm nod.
The EMP charge will do the job, but I have to get close, and it will set off every alarm on that mountain.
That's the point,
he said, his voice a grim and certain thing.
The second that tower goes down, it's the signal for us to go in, and for Peter and Amy to make their move on the inside. It's the first domino.
He looked at each of them, a commander making his final and most important speech.
This is not a rescue mission anymore. This is a two-pronged and coordinated assault. We are going in hard, and we are not leaving without our family. Is that understood?
He was met with a chorus of a grim and determined affirmations. The time for a planning was over. The time for a action had arrived.
Good. Check your comms, one last time. We go dark from here on out. We meet at the extraction point at dawn, or we don't meet at all.
The two teams clasped hands, a final and silent gesture of a love and a loyalty and a shared and terrible purpose. And then they were gone, two small and separate groups of ghosts, disappearing into the raging and black heart of the storm. The journey for Ty, Tim, and Caleb was a brutal and vertical hell. They were climbers now, their hands raw and bleeding on the slick and treacherous rock face. The wind was a physical and malevolent enemy, trying to tear them from their holds. The rain was a sheet of a pure and blinding ice. But they moved with a grim and unwavering determination, their shared purpose a fire that burned against the cold. At the same time, Ashley and Shane were engaged in their own and different kind of a battle. Their path was less a climb and more a quiet and deadly game of a stealth. They moved through the dark and tangled woods at the base of the mountain, their movements a silent and practiced dance. Ashley was in her element here, her senses on high alert, her mind a constant and analytical computer, assessing every shadow, every sound, every potential threat. They were two separate and vital parts of a single and deadly machine, and they were moving inexorably towards their targets. While the storm raged on the outside of the fortress, two separate and silent storms were gathering on the inside. The war for Heartland was now being waged not just with a ropes and a gear and a brute force, but with a quiet and deadly and digital precision. Peter Morris sat in his luxurious and gilded cage, his face a mask of a calm and professional focus. He was a man who had spent his entire life in a world of a numbers and a logic and a high-stakes corporate warfare, and he was now, in this moment, fighting the most important and most dangerous battle of his entire career. He was a ghost in Nathan's machine. Using the financial crisis that Lou had so brilliantly engineered as his cover, he had been granted an unprecedented and almost complete access to the fortress's internal network. He was supposed to be shoring up the digital defenses of Price Industries, a man trying to save his own personal Titanic from sinking. But he was not plugging the leaks. He was creating new ones. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a silent and elegant dance of a pure and brilliant sabotage. He was not a hacker, a brute force intruder. He was an artist. He moved through Nathan's complex and layered security systems with a quiet and almost invisible grace, a man who understood the language of the machine better than its own, creators. He was not leaving a trail of broken firewalls and tripped alarms. He was planting a garden of subtle and almost imperceptible logic bombs, a series of tiny and seemingly random data corruptions that, when activated, would create a cascading and catastrophic system failure. His target was not the main power grid. It was something far more subtle, the internal and non-essential administrative servers, the systems that controlled the heating, the lighting, the internal communications. He was not trying to kill the beast. He was just trying to give it a very public and very distracting seizure. At the same time, in her own separate suite, Amy Fleming was waging her own and very different kind of a war. She had continued her masterful and exhausting performance as the broken and pliable woman. She had spent the last few days in a state of a quiet and melancholic submission, a woman who had, it seemed, finally accepted her fate. Nathan, his attention now almost completely consumed by the corporate and financial firestorm that was raging in the outside world, had become a less frequent and more distracted visitor. He saw her quiet and submissive state not as an act but as a victory, a problem that had been solved. He had left her to her own and quiet and broken devices, and that had been his second and fatal mistake. She had spent her time well. She had learned the routines of the guards. She had learned the layout of her wing of the fortress. And she had, with a quiet and almost childish persistence, found her own and very specific kind of a leverage. She had, in a moment of a feigned and deep depression, refused to eat. The guards, under strict orders to keep the asset in a good health, had been forced to call in the fortress's on-site medic, and Amy, with a masterful and deeply an emotional performance of a woman on the verge of a complete and nervous breakdown, had convinced the medic that her mental state was a direct result of her confinement. She had spoken of a claustrophobia, of a panic attacks, of a desperate and primal need for a space, for a knowledge, for a simple and quiet distraction. Her performance had been so convincing that the medic, a man who was more of a doctor than a jailer, had taken pity on her. He had, against his better judgment and against the strict and standing orders of his employer, granted her a small and seemingly insignificant concession: access to the fortress's main library. It was a vast and beautiful room, 2 stories high, with floor-to-ceiling shelves of rare and priceless books. It was a place of a quiet and scholarly solitude. It was also, as Amy knew from the single and furtive glance she had gotten at a schematic on a guard's tablet, a room that shared a wall with the central security hub. She was not a prisoner anymore. She was a ghost, who was now, with a quiet and deadly resolve, moving silently and patiently towards her objective. She was waiting for the signal, the first loud and chaotic crack in Nathan's perfect and silent world, the signal that her husband and his small and determined army had arrived. The 2 separate teams moved through the raging storm, 2 prongs of a single and desperate attack. The first to reach their objective was the support team. Ashley and Shane crested a high and windswept ridge, the ground dropping away in a sheer and 1,000-foot cliff in front of them. Across a narrow and turbulent chasm of a swirling mist and a driving rain stood their target, the fortress's main communications tower, a slender and skeletal spire of a steel lattice, its red warning lights a series of defiant and blinking eyes in the heart of the hurricane. They were exposed here, on this high and barren ridge. They had to move fast. Shane immediately dropped to his belly, setting up a small and powerful spotting scope. His own hands, which had been trembling just a few short days ago, were now the steady and confident hands of a seasoned marksman. He began to call out the wind speed, the range, his voice a calm and professional murmur in Ashley's ear. Ashley was already at work, assembling their primary weapon. It was not a sniper rifle. It was something far more sophisticated. A long and heavy barrel was attached to a complex and electronic stock, a gift from Ahmed's arsenal. It was a long-range and targeted electromagnetic pulse launcher, a weapon designed not to kill, but to scramble and to blind. She lay beside Shane, a silent and focused predator in the storm. She sighted the tower, the red blinking lights a perfect and easy target in her high-tech scope.
I have a lock on your mark, Ty.
She whispered into her throat mic, her voice a calm and steady signal sent out into the storm. At the same time, a half a mile away, the assault team reached their own and very different objective. Ty, Tim, and Caleb stood in the small and rocky clearing, staring at the flat and moss-covered slab of a concrete that was their only way in. The wind howled around them, a mournful and impatient sound. Ty's own voice, a quiet and tense whisper in their comms, was the signal.
Ashley, we are in a position. Light it up.
Ashley did not hesitate. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. There was no sound, no explosion, only a faint and almost imperceptible electronic hum. A small and glowing blue projectile shot from the barrel of the rifle, a silent and beautiful blue star that streaked through the dark and stormy night. It hit the communications tower with a brilliant and silent flash of a pure and blue-white energy. For a single and breathtaking second, the entire tower was wreathed in a crackling and ethereal blue fire, and then it was gone. The red blinking warning lights, the one single sign of a life on the dark and stormy mountain, were extinguished. The tower was dead. The effect on the inside of the fortress was immediate and catastrophic. In the high-tech and futuristic security hub, a bank of a half-dozen and critical monitors, the ones that displayed all external communications and long-range surveillance, sparked and went dead. A technician, his face pale with a panic, spun in his chair to face Nathan. "Sir, we've lost the main comms tower. All external links are down. We're blind." Nathan Price, who had been watching the storm from his command chair, was on his feet in an instant, his own face a mask of a pure and cold fury. He did not have to be told what it meant. He was under a direct and sophisticated attack. The first domino in his perfect and untouchable kingdom had just fallen. The dead screens in the security hub were a silent and terrifying testament to their new reality. They were blind. They were cut off. Nathan Price, a man who had built an empire on the foundation of a total and absolute information control, was now trapped in the dark. The initial shocked silence in the room was shattered by his voice, a low and dangerous roar of a pure command.
"Lockdown! Now! Initiate internal security protocols! I want every non-essential system shut down, and I want a full and armed tactical team on the perimeter. Find them! Find whoever did this, and bring them to me!"
The room exploded into a controlled and professional chaos. Technicians, their faces pale with a new and unfamiliar fear, began to type frantically at their consoles, their movements a blur of a damaged control. And in the heart of this chaos, a new and powerful sound began to echo through the stone and steel corridors of the fortress. A loud and blaring and deeply and menacing alarm. The alarm was the signal, the starting gun for a desperate and high-stakes race against time. In the small and forgotten clearing a half a mile away, Ty, Tim, and Caleb heard the faint and wind-whipped sound of the siren. They looked at each other, a single and grim nod passing between them. The diversion had worked. Their window was open.
Let's go.
Tim and Caleb did not hesitate. They moved to the heavy and concrete plug that covered the ventilation shaft, their crowbars ready, their muscles tensed for the hard and brutal work that lay ahead. At the same time, deep within the fortress, in the quiet and scholarly solitude of the massive library, Amy Fleming heard the alarm. Her head snapped up from the book she had been pretending to read, her heart a frantic and joyous drum against her ribs. It was them. They were here. She did not wait. She did not hesitate. She stood up, her movements calm and deliberate, and she began to walk towards the back of the library, towards the small and unmarked service door that she knew, from her furtive and stolen glances at the schematics, led to the maintenance corridor that ran behind the central security hub. And in his own and luxurious prison, Peter Morris heard the alarm. He saw the red and flashing emergency lights begin to pulse on his own and secure computer terminal. He, too, did not hesitate. He initiated the final and most dangerous phase of his own and silent war, the sale of the GenChem subsidiary. With a single and final keystroke, he unleashed a new and even more catastrophic wave of a pure and financial chaos upon Nathan Price's already crumbling empire. The episode ends on a heart-stopping and cross-cut cliffhanger, a symphony of three separate and converging acts of a desperate and heroic rebellion. We see Ty, his face a mask of a pure and unwavering resolve, as he and Tim jam their crowbars into the seam of the concrete plug, the first and crucial breach of the fortress's physical walls about to begin. We see Amy, a silent and deadly ghost in the machine, her hand on the handle of the service door, about to step into the dark and secret heart of her enemy's kingdom. And we see Peter, a lone and brilliant warrior in a digital war, as he hits the enter key, the final and fatal blow to Nathan's financial empire now delivered. The final shot is back in the security hub. A technician, His face pale with a new and even more terrifying kind of a panic turns to Nathan. Sir, it's not just the comms tower. The whole market just collapsed. We're hemorrhaging money. And there's another breach. An unauthorized access point in the sublevels. Nathan Price stands in the center of his collapsing kingdom, his face a mask of a pure and unadulterated rage, as he realizes that he is not just under an attack from the outside. He is being torn apart from within. The war for Heartland had just, in a single and chaotic and beautiful moment, truly and finally begun.